Omisamake. This is Evan Simmons checking in, and today I'll be giving you and maybe the class a sort of overview of Unit 4, specifically talking about the ever-evolving definition of justice, and especially as it pertains to such a controversial event as capital punishment and what sort of place it has in society according to people, according to government, and according to our sort of religious authorities and Catholic social teaching. So to begin with, what is justice, and especially in this context of the death penalty, justice is commonly defined as rendering to each what is owed, or to each what is due. And so basically, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Whatever you do, positive or negative, it should be reflected in whatever action gets reciprocated back to that offender or whatever. Or you could say vengeance or justice for the victim. If they got a loss as personal as maybe just the violation of the sanctity of their body, or in such cases rape, or a loss of a loved one, or a loss of their own life, they should be able to enact a similar punishment, like is commonly referred to as to each what is due. A prominent figure, however, displayed in the book, Lloyd Steffen, challenges this point, finding that vengeance is not justice, and it may seek justice, but justice will not be had. Vengeance serves the illusion that the loss from death can be put right by the death of another. And of course, this can transcend just matters of capital punishment, but focusing today, we're going to see what our religious authorities, Catholic social teaching, how it informs us, and really whether or not justice can be achieved through the death penalty. So at the 1974 U.S. Catholic Conference, where a committee of many bishops congregated, they all voted in a substantial majority, sorry about the clock by the way, substantial majority to oppose capital punishment. It's noteworthy that they did not say that it was not a unanimous vote, because some people still did believe that in fact you could say capital punishment is justified. And of course there are pros and cons, and this is a controversial topic, both secularly and in a religious context or moral context. There's issues of simple pragmatism, like the economic cost of holding a prisoner in life versus the economic cost of injecting them, or just shooting them. But there's many other issues that are of concern, such as innocently executing someone, as well as this ever-evolving definition of justice from each to what he is due, to something that focuses on this restoration, this healing, and that recognizes the needs of both the victim and the perpetrator, the victim and the offender. They have needs, and those needs need to be attended to. So, moving back to the U.S. Catholic Conference, they defined 4 major values that were protected and recognized when you opposed the capital punishment. The first being was that this would promote the search for other humane ways that were not vengeful, in order to deal with violent crimes. This could mean anything from how saturated violence is in our cultures, through video games, through our media, and media like our television, and just in the news, how it is often glorified. But also the idea of rehabilitation versus punishment, not just even capitally, when resulting in a death, but just punishment as an idea, as that is how you serve justice. How we treat offenders at any level, at a grade school level, at an infant level, and how we raise people to become morally upstanding, and then what do we do to correct them, or how do we get them to correct themselves? So that's always a question that needs to be asked. The second major value that they found that you could recognize when you defy capital punishment as being morally permissible is the dignity of the person. And as this also ties in with the idea of restorative justice, this new definition of justice, it essentially asserts that yes, every single person has dignity, and so of course, victims of assault, victims of murder, they have dignity, but also every single person still has that same dignity that does not change. Someone did not have more value before they committed an act than after the fact, and because of that reason, you cannot end someone's life because you are ending their value, essentially. And the third that this also ties into is a whole entire Catholic. This is a very Catholic, not necessarily a moral or a secular talking point, but definitely a religious one. A Catholic social teaching is that God is the giver of life, and if we recognize that everyone has a right to life, and that God is the sole giver of it, then we can't say that certain people have forfeited their right to that life, especially when just the logical inconsistencies that come up when you have people who oppose abortion, because that is the purpose ending of life at conception, but yet they would be okay with having a capital punishment. And then finally, the last value that they thought that was very important and that was promoted when you defy capital punishment was that it promotes forgiveness. And so instead of ending someone's life, you promote this idea of forgiveness where it's not something that the perpetrator or the offender, the murderer, they have to sort of earn, like they have to somehow transform themselves, but rather something that is freely given and is more of a reflection of the actual victim rather than the perpetrator. Essentially, how you deal with someone who's committed a wrong is just as important as the wrong that was committed. And in fact, it's very important on how we reflect as a society when we are teaching our kids that violence is okay if it's mandated by the state. There's also other complicated things that you could tie into here secularly, of state versus person. Why does the state have the express right to kill people lawfully, but we can't kill people? How that's kind of logically inconsistent and actually very dangerous if we were to have a tyrannical government, which some say we already do, that's already discriminating unfairly against the poor. That's definitely documentable, but also one that is racist, especially with our policing system. And so that's just one of the myriad of reasons and ways that people are arguing about this topic. And finally, my final authoritative figure on this is going to be Pope John Paul II. And what he has to say about it is that this capital punishment ought not go to the extreme or the extreme of executing the offender, except in cases of absolute necessity, such as protecting society, basically saving more lives, utilitarianism. But he finds that such cases are very rare, if not practically non-existent, in our modern world, where we have jails, we have the infrastructure in place, we have millions of people in jail already. Escaping from a high security prison does not happen. It's virtually non-existent that would happen unless you are let off by a judge or you have reduced sentencing. And so then moving on to this creates this broader picture, which was surprisingly started in 1974 when the conference came to this conclusion, which personally I thought was seemingly very early for that sort of idea of restorative justice to start culminating. But this is the idea that there is not a victim nor an offender, one that needs to have vengeance and one that needs to be punished. Rather, these are two lives that intersect through harmful decisions or harmful behavior, and whose needs must be met. Both people's needs must be met, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. Obviously, there's something wrong with someone who goes to such extreme as killing someone. You can just take a look at the popular film and even controversial film, The Joker, that just came out last year, where it's talking about this man who is mentally ill, and he's basically being ridiculed by society, and finally he snaps. He kills a TV host, a late night show host, and he basically starts his own anarchical revolution because he's fighting against a society that basically ignored him. And so when we really look at what's restorative justice, yes, we can obviously understand that some people's actions are wrong and that they shouldn't just be let off the hook, but especially in cases where they can be separated from society and that they won't cause an immediate threat to it, we need to be looking at ways where not only can we forgive them, but look for ways so that they can forgive themselves and for them to have this moral redemption. Obviously, that's a tricky situation when you have a murderer who, after maybe 20 years, thinks that he has some sort of revelation. How are you to trust that, and do you let them back into society? But at the very least, it's just that the economic reasons as to why it's actually it's actually better to just hold on to a prisoner for life. It's actually less expensive somehow. And actually, interestingly enough, I don't really know why they don't shoot people on death row. I never understood that. I wouldn't really see how that would be more inhumane than injecting someone with some sort of poison, even if it was painless, even though there's actually a lot of evidence that it actually is quite painful, excruciatingly so, until someone's final moments. But moving on from all of that, there's the economic reason, there's the secular reason of this, not church versus state, but kind of state, who holds the power, who holds the keys to be able to decide who lives and dies, and how that should be sort of democratic, and you shouldn't have an autocratic government that's silencing certain people and that's killing certain people. Obviously, we need to be we need to give people opportunity to be able to have that redemption, and we need to also be looking at the fact that many innocent people are put on death row or just put into the prison system unjustifiably. Whether you want to argue about the 1994 crime bill that's currently locking up tons of minorities and white folks, but disproportionately minorities, and marijuana, the legalization of marijuana. But of course, this also goes down to the extreme of capital punishment, where people are innocents are inexcusably or unjustifiably killed. So I hope that covers it. Today we were looking at justice, how it's always evolving, how the idea of rights are always evolving, and how it's always very tricky to navigate certain rights, because you do have rights, but you also have responsibilities. You need to keep people safe, but you also need to keep everyone safe. You want to save lives, but you want to save the most amount of lives. You want to save money, but you want to save the most amount of money. How do you balance all of these things? And it turns into a much bigger picture than just simply a push of a button or a certain bill, but more of a systematic and definitional, what is justice, what should we do, what is moral, and what is ethical. That was kind of big picture stuff, but I hope that covers it. Thank you.